Odd, 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 odd. Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. A big welcome to my new subscribers who have pushed me over the 100 mark, so thank you so much. I am Sam and today I'm going to be talking about my favourite fictional characters who I personally believe are on the autistic spectrum. Disclaimer, I know there are some people out there who think that you shouldn't diagnose fictional characters, you shouldn't be an armchair psychologist, blah blah blah. I actually do have a psychology degree, not that I think it makes a difference. But in case you were wondering, this is for entertainment purposes only. Entertainment and my personal headcanon. I get that they probably weren't written with autism in mind, but considering that there are so few representations of autistic characters in the media, I think it can only be a good thing to try and hijack a few characters who I really think were on the spectrum. So let's dive in. Number 1, Mr. Darcy from Pride and Prejudice. So I have a whole headcanon actually about a lot of Jane Austen characters, especially within Pride and Prejudice. But my favourite Austen character, and one that I relate a lot to, has to be Mr. Darcy. In my mind, there is no doubt that he is autistic. And let me prove it to you. Yes, like everyone pretty much out there, I consider the Colin Firth portrayal of Mr. Darcy to be #ultimate Darcy, but the 2005 version with Matthew Macfadyen? No idea how to say his name. The 2005 version is really interesting because I feel like he played Darcy in a particularly autistic way. Looking for signs of autism in his character might be the only reason to watch that version though. Just my opinion, might be unpopular. But since we're being purists here and since I have a supposedly classical education, let's refer back to the original text.
GCSE flashbacks.
When we are first introduced to him at the ball in Meryton, he insults Elizabeth by basically saying he hates parties, isn't comfortable, and really doesn't want to bother with a random woman unless she's like a mega hottie. So he says, "She is tolerable, but not handsome enough to tempt me, and I am in no humour at present to give consequence to young ladies who are slighted by other men." His character is misunderstood as proud and conceited by everyone except those who have known him the longest. When Elizabeth throws accusations at him that she believes to be true but are of course partly false, he responds in a very classically autistic way by writing a long letter detailing the logic and rationale behind his actions and decisions, or at least his version of the truth. He's loyal to his friends and bears grudges against those who betray him. He also has a massive library and reads extensively, something which, okay, he was a nobleman, but I'm not sure would have been that common for somebody of his standing in those days. He has a deep understanding of his own faults and an openness and frankness to talk about them with the people that he trusts. But he can't work out how to make easy conversation, and even though Elizabeth alludes this is because he doesn't practice, I guess autism awareness wasn't that hot in 1813, he says to her, "I'm ill qualified to recommend myself to strangers. I certainly have not the talent which some people possess of conversing easily with those I have never seen before. I cannot catch their tone of conversation or appear interested in their concerns, as I often see done." I think that there is also a case to be argued that many of the Bennets, including especially Mr. Collins, are on the spectrum, and even that Lydia might have ADHD, but I know some remain unconvinced. However, listen to the way that Austen describes Mr. Bennet. "Mr. Bennet was so odd a mixture of quick parts, sarcastic humour, reserve and caprice." And consider this for a minute. Austen writes the characters who have a natural way with people and love to talk and network as the bad guys. Think about Frank Churchill and George Wickham. Those who are charming and talkative almost invariably turn out to be shallow, petty and untrustworthy. Her heroes, on the other hand, defy social norms, can be socially awkward and tend to be a little bit more self-contained. So I'm not saying Jane Austen was autistic, but she was probably autistic. Number 2, Anya from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Anya is an ex-demon who becomes newly human upon her arrival in season 3 of Buffy, and she joins the Scooby Gang until the very end. She's unfamiliar with human culture, and no matter how hard she tries, she finds it really hard to fit in. She gets intense joy out of her special interests, like counting money, even though she's not particularly materialistic per se. Now I hear you say, but she's an ex-demon. That explains why she can't understand human culture. But wait. In the 5th episode of season 7, Selfless, we see a flashback to Anya's pre-vengeance demon days in Sweden, where she lived as Odd the human. Odd, 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 Odd. We see that she has been an outcast her whole life, with a strangely literal interpretation of the world even as a human. She says, "I don't talk to people much. I mean, I talk to them, but they don't talk to me, except to say, your questions are irksome, and perhaps you should take your furs and your literal interpretations to the other side of the river." Her defining personality trait is brutal honesty, lack of tact, and questionable social skills. Her special interests bring her much joy and fulfillment, these being money, capitalism, and running a business in the magic box. Number 3, Paris Geller from Gilmore Girls. Paris is honest to the point of blunt, overachieving, but when she's rejected from Harvard, she has a meltdown in public, on TV no less. She says, "I am not cut out to deal with people." I relate to that too. Her brutal honesty is her trademark, which she employs frequently and without consideration for the effect that it has on other people. I do think there's a case to be made for Rory being on the spectrum as well, and it kind of explains how the two of them end up being friends despite not really liking each other that much, or not seeming to. They just kind of forge a friendship based on commonalities. Number 4, Katniss Everdeen from The Hunger Games. She dislikes and distrusts most people, and a lot of symptoms of autism can be mistaken for symptoms of trauma. She doesn't know how to fit in, and she's uncomfortable with attention on her. Most of all, she's unwilling to play social games. I think it's the 75th year of the Hunger Games or something, so it's only now with Katniss that somebody's come along who said, "I'm not going to put up with this bullshit." Which is kind of strange to me. I feel like it might have happened earlier in real life, but 75 years, I think it is anyway. Now, I know part of this is a little bit of a trope, of the young adult trope of the chosen one, you know, the teenage savior, but part of her strength is her no bullshit attitude and her unwillingness to play games. The chosen one trope is something that does resonate with me, particularly as an autistic person, because it speaks to this feeling of not being in the right place, or being lonely and different from everyone else in the world. I think the popularity of young adult fiction, and this trope in particular, can explain why we are seeing a few more autistic type characters popping up here and there, because they're all using this trope, and that is something that teenagers probably identify with in terms of loneliness and isolation, but autistic people tend to identify with more throughout their lives as well. And number 5, Dexter from the TV show Dexter. Now, this is one of my favourite shows and something that I rewatch every now and then, but when I first watched it, I guess I took kind of a literal interpretation that he was supposed to just be a psychopath that was reacting to trauma. But once someone pointed it out to me, of course he's autistic, it's so obvious. His shocking and gruesome murders lead the audience to believe that he lacks conscience, but of course the whole point of the TV series is that it guides you through the process of realizing that actually he does have a conscience after all. So I personally just assumed that most of his character was based upon the extreme childhood trauma that he suffered. But look at it this way, he hates being touched despite not having been violently assaulted or abused himself. He has trouble understanding what he's supposed to say or how he's supposed to react in social situations. He even talks about the way he's cultivated a whole persona at work, being the donut guy. His whole life is the persona of a character that he's playing. He essentially pretends to be as normal as possible, partly as a cover for his murders, but I do believe that even without this aspect of his behaviour, he would still struggle to fit in anyway. He strictly adheres to the rules as laid out by his late father, and becomes agitated when they have to be broken for whatever reason. He likes order, routine, and cleanliness. I would say that Dexter is probably the most obviously autistic of the 5 characters I've mentioned, and there is plenty of evidence for this throughout the whole series, as it is a show that gives us a very deep insight into the workings of his mind. So what do you think? Do you like diagnosing fictional characters as much as I do? Let me know if I'm wrong down below in the comments. And if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe for more content every week. Bye!